I didn't know who he was. I just knew he was dying in the rain, and I couldn't leave him there." The words tore out of Valentina Santos before she could stop them, her voice shattered like glass in the November darkness. 2:47 in the morning. The Miami Port District lay swallowed in rain that fell like needles, neon reflections bleeding across wet asphalt in shades of pink and sickly green. She knelt in a warehouse doorway, her threadbare coat soaked through, water streaming down her face as she cradled a man's head in her lap. His white shirt was turning crimson. Blood seeped through the fabric in a slow, terrible bloom, and her hands, small, calloused from years of dish shifts, pressed her only scarf against the wound in his side. She didn't know his name was Rafael Ferraro. She didn't know that the crumpled black Mercedes 15 feet away, wrapped around a concrete pillar like a crushed tin can, belonged to one of the most feared crime bosses in 3 counties. The driver lay unconscious against the steering wheel, blood running from a gash above his eye. She just knew a human being was dying. His breathing came in shallow gasps, his chest barely moving. His face was a study in marble, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, a scar that ran from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone like a blade had once tried to split him open. Even bleeding, even helpless, there was something dangerous about him, something that made the animal part of her brain scream to run. She didn't run. Her finger stayed pressed against his wound. Her other hand hovered near his face, trembling. The rain hammered down, each drop colder than the last, and she tilted her body over him like she could shield him from the sky itself. A sound cut through the noise of the storm. An engine. Slow. Deliberate. A black SUV rolled past the warehouse entrance, moving at the speed of a funeral procession. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like the eyes of something dead. Valentina froze. Every survival instinct she'd developed living on the street screamed at her. Don't be seen. Don't be noticed. Disappear. But she didn't move. The SUV's brake lights flared red in the darkness. For 3 seconds that stretched like hours, nothing happened. Then the vehicle rolled forward again, disappearing into the rain. She exhaled. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip her scarf. Don't think about that. Don't think about anything but keeping him breathing. Her phone, a cracked smartphone older than some children she knew, sat in her pocket. She fumbled for it with wet fingers, nearly dropped it twice, and dialed with an urgency that came from somewhere deeper than fear. She didn't think about the consequences. She didn't think about the men in the black SUV or what they wanted or why this man had been driving a car worth more than her entire life savings. She just called. Sirens came 12 minutes later. They wailed across the wet streets like a prayer answered, and Valentina felt something in her chest release. The paramedics were fast, efficient, professionals who didn't ask questions. They loaded him onto a stretcher, his head lolling to the side, his body limp as cloth. She stood back, dripping wet, watching them work. One of them looked at her. Young guy, maybe late 20s, with kind eyes. You did good, he said. You saved his life. She nodded. Didn't speak. What was there to say? She watched the ambulance disappear into the rain, its red and blue lights painting the wet pavement in colors of urgency. Then she turned back to her Honda Civic parked across the street, the car that was slowly becoming her permanent home, and climbed into the driver's seat. Everything she owned was in that car. Everything. Her backpack on the passenger seat held 3 changes of clothes, a pair of shoes with holes in the soles, a paperback book with a spine cracked from reading it 4 times, a toothbrush, a bar of soap, and photographs. So many photographs. She didn't look at them tonight. Tonight she just sat in the driver's seat, shaking, water dripping from her hair onto the steering wheel. In the glove compartment, tucked under the insurance document she'd stopped paying for 3 months ago, sat an eviction notice. Red ink. 12 days. Harold Brennan's name printed at the top like a curse. $85,000. She had $5. 5. Not 500. Not 5,000. 5 actual dollars, crumpled in her coat pocket, that needed to last until Thursday when she got paid in cash from the diner. $12 per hour, 6-hour shifts, and tips that barely covered the gas station bathroom where she'd started her day yesterday, or was it today? Time had become a liquid thing when you weren't sleeping in a bed. The windshield fogged as her wet clothes began to dry. She sat there in the dark, hands gripping the steering wheel, and tried not to think about the mathematics of impossibility. $85,000. 12 days. $5 in her pocket. She had known worse odds. She was still breathing. The rain continued to fall. Thunder rolled across the sky like furniture being dragged across the floor of heaven. Valentina closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind kept returning to the man in the warehouse doorway. His blood on her hands, now dried to rust-brown stains. The terrible quiet of his breathing. The way his eyes had flickered open for just a moment, unfocused and distant, as the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance. She wondered if he would survive. She wondered if it mattered. Meanwhile, in a high-rise office building 14 blocks away, Rafael Ferraro's lieutenants were making phone calls in hushed, urgent voices. The boss had been found. He was alive. But barely. Tony, his oldest lieutenant, a man with silver threading through his dark hair and shoulders broad as a doorway, sat in the emergency room waiting area at St. Mary's Hospital, his phone pressed to his ear. How bad? The voice on the other end asked. It belonged to Franco, Rafael's second-in-command, a man with cold eyes and a collection of guns he'd named after his mother's recipes. Tony's jaw tightened. 3 bullets. 1 in his side, 2 in his shoulder. The doctors won't know until they're inside him whether he'll walk again or spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Silence. Then Franco spoke again, each word like ice cracking. And the driver? Conscious now. Concussion, broken ribs, but alive. He says Carmine did it. Says Rafael's own brother sold him to the Costianos. Another silence. Find Carmine, Franco said. Find him before the boss wakes up. Because if Rafael doesn't get to him first, the Costianos will use him as insurance, and then we'll have a real problem. The line went dead. Tony stared at his phone, then out the window at the grey Miami dawn beginning to paint the sky. Somewhere in this hospital, a man was fighting for his life on an operating table. That man had raised Tony from nothing. Had taken him off the streets of Little Havana when he was 17 and hungry. Had taught him loyalty, how to survive, how to make money and keep secrets. And his own brother had tried to kill him. The sun rose on a city that didn't care about the violence brewing beneath its surface. By noon, Rafael Ferraro would be in surgery for 8 hours and 15 minutes. By midnight, he would be in the intensive care unit with 4 armed guards outside his room and a price on his brother's head that would make sure Carmine Ferraro would never see another sunrise. But none of this mattered to Valentina Santos, who was washing her face in a gas station bathroom 3 miles away, scrubbing the dried blood from under her fingernails, staring at her fractured reflection in a grimy mirror while November rain hammered the Miami streets outside. She had a 6-hour shift starting in 40 minutes. A diner that smelled like grease and burned coffee. Minimum wage. The hope that someone would leave her a $5 tip, which would give her $10 to her name. The mathematics of survival. She didn't know that everything was about to change. She didn't know that the man she'd found in the rain would spend the next 5 days asking every doctor, every nurse, every person who came near his hospital bed the same question, who saved me? She didn't know that when Rafael Ferraro finally learned her name, he would begin searching for her with the same methodical intensity he used to dismantle his enemies. She didn't know that in 7 days, when an eviction notice with a 12-day deadline would have just 2 days left before it became permanent, that man would walk into her life like a door opening onto a world she'd never imagined. All she knew was that she was still breathing. The rain kept falling. And somewhere in the neon-soaked darkness of a Miami hospital, a man with a scar on his face and 3 bullets in his body began to fight his way back to consciousness, back to life, back to the question that would consume him: who was she? The Shell gas station on Biscayne Boulevard smelled like stale coffee and cleaning fluid. The bathroom mirror was cracked diagonally from the left corner, turning Valentina Santos's reflection into two separate pieces that didn't quite line up. She leaned closer to the grimy glass, watching cold water run across her wrists as she scrubbed the dried blood from under her fingernails. Red spirals swirled down the white porcelain sink. Her hands were trembling. Not from fear. From exhaustion. Valentina had 6 hours before her shift at the Harbor View diner started. 6 hours to shower in a gas station bathroom sink, to change into her only clean shirt, to make herself look like a human being instead of what she actually was. A woman living in her 2009 Honda Civic. A woman who had slept in the back seat for 42 consecutive nights. A woman who was running out of time. She turned off the water and stared at her reflection. Dark circles hung beneath her green eyes like bruises. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the fluorescent bathroom light. Her black hair hung in a matted rope down her back. She was 28 years old but looked like she had lived twice that long. The girl in the cracked mirror looked like someone who had already given up. Valentina pulled her hair back with a rubber band, twisted it into a tight knot at the base of her neck. She pulled off her stained shirt and changed into the white button-down she had washed by hand in a truck stop bathroom 3 days ago. A coffee stain still marked the left pocket, small and brown like a bloodstain. She had tried everything to get it out. Bleach. Vinegar. Prayer. Nothing worked. Nothing ever worked. From her backpack, she removed the second shirt, the one with a hole in the shoulder. Then the jeans with the split seam. Then the underwear she had rinsed out every evening in restaurant bathrooms. Then the toothbrush with bristles worn down to soft nubs. At the very bottom, folded precisely, was the piece of paper that haunted every moment of her existence. The eviction notice. Red ink. Official seal. 12 days remaining. Valentina unfolded it carefully, as if the paper itself might shatter. Harold Brennan's signature sprawled across the bottom in aggressive loops. The amount was printed in bold, $85,000 in back rent. 12 days to pay it or the sheriff would come with chains and a truck. Her car would be impounded. Her possessions would be catalogued and sold. She would have nothing. She would be invisible. She already was invisible. She counted her money in the bathroom stall. $5. 2 wrinkled bills and 3 singles, all that remained from last week's tips. Servers at the Harbor View made minimum wage, $12.30 per hour, plus tips that usually amounted to nothing. The truckers were generous if they were drunk. The port workers left coins. The elderly pensioners apologized for leaving nothing at all. $5. That was her net worth on this morning. That was all that stood between Valentina Santos and complete annihilation. The drive to the diner took 12 minutes. She passed through neighborhoods that grew progressively more warm the closer she got to the waterfront. Boarded-up storefronts. Chain-link fences. Empty lots where buildings had been demolished. The rain hadn't started yet, but the sky was the color of old concrete, heavy and threatening, the kind of sky that looked like it might never stop. The Harbor View diner sat on a corner lot at the edge of the Port District, a relic from the 1950s with a faded turquoise exterior and windows so dirty you could barely see inside. A red neon sign that had been flickering for 3 years advertised breakfast. The parking lot held 3 cars besides Valentina's Civic. Mondays were slow. Everyone knew it. The manager, Dennis, would probably send her home early. She clocked in at 7:45 a.m. and tied the apron around her waist. The uniform was beige, the color of institutional buildings, stained with spills and burns and the general degradation of 5,000 shifts worked by women like her. Women passing through. Women on their way down. The morning crowd consisted of 5 truckers at the counter and 2 port workers in a booth near the window. Valentina refilled coffee cups, set down plates of eggs and hash browns, and smiled with the particular smile of a woman who depends on the kindness of strangers. The smile that says, "I am grateful for your presence in my life." The smile that means nothing to anyone. By 2 p.m., the diner had emptied. Dennis, a man with sweat-stained shirts and a perpetual scowl, found her wiping down the counter. "We're done for the day, Santos. Not worth paying you to stand around." She nodded and removed her apron. $23 in tips sat in her pocket. $23. Her heart did the mathematics automatically. $28 total now. $84,972 short of survival. The rain started at 3:41 p.m., cold November downpour that turned the streets into rivers of grey water. Valentina drove her car, parking it in the back of a closed warehouse near the port, a spot she had used for 3 weeks now. The rain drummed on the roof like 1,000 fingers tapping code. She sat in the back seat with the money spread out in front of her. $28. She counted it 3 times to make sure the first 2 times hadn't been a hallucination. $28. She could buy gas or food but not both. She could buy gas and drink water from the drinking fountain at a public library. She could buy food and sleep in her car for 5 more days before it ran out of fuel. The eviction notice lay on the passenger seat, the red ink seeming to glow in the fading light. 12 days. 11 now. Maybe 10. Time was moving faster than it should have been, like her life was a video being played on fast forward. Harold Brennan's face appeared in her memory. She had seen him that morning, actually seen him, when she went to pay the latest installment of her weekly rent. He was a man in his 60s with the kind of weight that comes from money and malice, with a watch on his wrist that probably cost more than her car. He had smiled when she handed him $50 from her food budget. $75 short, he had said, sliding the bills back across the desk. Again. "I'll have it next week," she had whispered. He had leaned back in his chair, and his expression had shifted into something that looked like genuine pleasure. "You have 12 days, Ms. Santos. Then the sheriff comes. Then your car gets impounded. Then you sleep under a bridge like a beggar. That is how these things work." Meanwhile, 3 miles away on the other side of Miami, Catherine Mercer sat in her glass-walled office on the 42nd floor of a building that bore her name. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin of her face. She wore a white suit that cost $8,000 and rings on every finger that caught the afternoon light like weapons. She was a woman of 52 who looked 30, the kind of beauty purchased through violence and discipline rather than genetics. In front of her sat photographs of Miami blocks. Her blocks. The ones she owned. The ones with tenants she was slowly forcing out. Harold Brennan had called her that morning. "The Santos woman is broken," he had said. "She's got maybe 10 days before she loses her car." Catherine had smiled, a smile like a knife cutting through air. "Then push her. Make sure she knows it's coming. Make sure she feels every moment of it." What Valentina did not know was that Catherine Mercer had already visited the Harbor View diner, sitting in a back booth in sunglasses, watching the servers work. What Valentina did not know was that Catherine had already decided something. The property where Valentina had been renting for 7 years, a modest 2-bedroom house owned by an elderly landlord she paid $50 a month to, was now at the center of Catherine's next development plan. Luxury condominiums. A boutique hotel. A shopping center. The only thing in the way was Valentina Santos. Rain continued falling as darkness arrived at 5:44 p.m. Valentina moved her car from the warehouse to a different spot, 3 blocks away near the water, where the shipping containers and industrial equipment made the place look more like a graveyard than a residential area. She climbed into the back seat and pulled a blanket, thin and stained but still intact, across her body. The smell of the rain mixed with salt water and diesel fuel hung in the air. Somewhere nearby, an engine rumbled to life. A horn sounded. The automated beeping of a truck backing up echoed across the port. These were the sounds of her life now. The sounds of the margins. The sounds of people moving cargo and money while she sat in the darkness, counting every breath, every heartbeat, every second that brought her closer to disappearing entirely. She closed her eyes and did not sleep. The rain hammered against the warehouse windows like 1,000 accusing fingers. 2:34 in the morning. Valentina Santos jerked upright in her reclined driver's seat, her heart already sprinting before her mind caught up with what she was hearing. Screeching tires. The explosion of metal colliding with concrete. The sound didn't belong to this industrial section of the port, it belonged to catastrophe. She scrambled forward, peering through the rain-streaked windshield. 50 yards away, a black Mercedes wrapped itself around a concrete pillar like a fist closing. Smoke rose from beneath the crumpled hood, mixing with the November rain in ghostly spirals. For 3 seconds, Valentina sat frozen. She should start the engine. She should drive away. She should mind her business and protect the fragile piece of her invisible life. Then she saw movement in the back seat. A man, attempting to crawl out. Even from this distance, even through the darkened rain, she could see him struggling, could see the effort it took him to move at all. She didn't think about the fact that she had $5 in her pocket. She didn't think about the eviction notice waiting on her windshield. She grabbed her phone, cracked screen, barely any battery, and dialed 911, her fingers shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. The dispatcher's voice came through calm and professional. Valentina gave the intersection, her voice raw, told them there had been an accident, told them people needed help now. Then she ran. Her sneakers, more holes than shoe at this point, splashed through puddles as she crossed the distance. Rain soaked through her coat, a thin thing held together with safety pins and prayer. The driver slumped unconscious in the front seat, trapped behind the airbag. The back passenger door hung open at an angle, and there on the wet asphalt, was a man crawling forward like a wounded animal, leaving a trail of blood that the rain diluted but could not erase. Valentina dropped to her knees beside him. "Sir! Sir, don't move!" He turned his head. Even through the pain contorting his features, she saw his eyes, dark, intense, the kind of eyes that had seen violence and dealt it back with precision. His face was built for cruelty, sharp and angular, with a scar running from his left temple to his jawline like a blade's kiss. But right now, in this moment, he was just a man bleeding into the rain. "Ambulance, no!" His voice came out fractured, each word an effort. "They'll find me." She didn't understand what he meant. She didn't understand that understanding could wait. She pressed her scarf against the wound in his side, a deep laceration that made her stomach turn, and dragged him toward the warehouse doorway. He was heavy, dead weight, and her arms screamed in protest, but she did not stop. The rain fell harder. The sound of it on the metal containers became a roar. "Help is coming," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Just stay still. Help is coming." His hand shot out and gripped her wrist with surprising strength. His eyes found hers and held them, studying her face like he was memorizing it, cataloguing every detail as if this moment mattered more than breath itself. "Who are you?" he gasped. "Valentina. Just stay still." Then his eyes closed, and she thought she was watching a man die. She had prayed harder in her life during those minutes than she had in years. She prayed in Spanish, the language of her grandmother, the language of her childhood before everything broke. She kept her scarf pressed against his wound. She kept her other hand on his shoulder, anchoring him to the world, refusing to let him slip away into whatever darkness was calling. The black SUVs arrived before the ambulance. 4 of them, moving in formation with the precision of a military operation. Men in dark suits poured out into the rain, their shoes barely making a sound on the wet ground. One of them, tall, muscular, with grey threading through his dark hair, barked orders in a voice like thunder. "Get him in the car now." The other men moved to Rafael with practiced efficiency. But one of them, smaller, leaner, with intelligent eyes that took in Valentina in a single glance, stopped. "Who the hell are you?" His name was Tony, though she didn't know that yet. "I called 911. I found him. I was trying to." Tony made a decision in 2 seconds. Some calculation passed behind his eyes, and he nodded once. "You saved his life. Go. Forget you saw this. Forget his face. Forget all of it." They lifted Rafael, careful, despite the urgency, into the back of the nearest SUV. Another man, Franco, pressed something into Valentina's shaking hand. Money. Wet bills. She looked down and saw $200. You were never here, Franco said, and his voice carried the weight of a promise and a threat all at once. The SUVs vanished into the rain like they had never existed. Within 4 minutes, the ambulance arrived, its lights cutting through the darkness. The paramedics found only the crashed Mercedes and the unconscious driver. No sign of the wounded man. No sign of the woman who had tried to save him. Just an empty sidewalk and the lingering smell of rain and blood and diesel fuel. Valentina walked back to her car. The $200 felt like a stone in her pocket. She looked down at her hands and saw blood mixed with rain, blood that wasn't hers, blood that belonged to a man she would never see again. Or so she thought. 3 days passed like scenes from a dream she couldn't quite remember. Valentina returned to the Harbor View diner, clocking in for her shifts, serving coffee to people who barely saw her. She picked up the extra night shift, knowing she needed every dollar, every single penny. The eviction notice was still on her windshield. 9 days now. 9 days until Harold Brennan came through with his legal papers, until he made her invisible official and permanent. She told no one about the accident. No one about the man or the money or the black SUVs. It felt like a secret that could destroy her if she let it escape. Meanwhile, in a private hospital room in Coral Gables, Rafael Ferraro woke to pain and the steady beeping of machines. Tony and Franco stood guard on either side of his bed like sentinels. The doctor delivered his report with clinical precision: fractured ribs, deep laceration requiring 42 stitches, minor concussion, stable condition, complete recovery expected within 6 weeks. Rafael listened with only half his attention. His mind was elsewhere, focused on a single image, the woman's face lit by nothing but the rain and whatever courage burned behind her eyes. He turned his head toward Tony. The woman, he said, his voice rough from disuse. Dark hair. Brown eyes. She said her name was Valentina. Find her. Tony and Franco exchanged looks, the kind of looks men exchange when they have worked together for over a decade and know each other's thoughts without words. They had the security footage from the warehouse camera, grainy but clear enough. They had watched it 7 times already. The woman dragging a man twice her size to safety in the rain. The way her hands shook as she pressed fabric to his wound. The way she stayed even when she could have run. Even when she had every reason to run. On it, boss, Tony said quietly. He pulled out his phone and made 3 calls. Within the hour, 4 men were scouring the port, checking footage, interviewing workers, building a picture of a woman no one paid attention to. A woman who had become invisible simply by never being noticed. At that same hour, Valentina was washing her face in a gas station bathroom, the soap harsh against her skin, the mirror showing her a reflection that looked older than her years. When she returned to her car, Harold Brennan was waiting, leaning against her Honda Civic with the casual confidence of a man who believed the world belonged to him. He was 43, with graying hair and a cheap suit stretched across a beer gut. His smile never reached his eyes. It was the smile of someone practicing cruelty the way an actor practices a line. 9 days left, Valentina, he said as she approached. You got my money. Mr. Brennan, I'm working every shift I can. I got a better idea. He stepped closer, and she smelled alcohol and expensive cologne, a sickening combination. Catherine Mercer wants to buy your old apartment building. You're the last lease. You signed the release, I forget the $85,000. Easy. That's my home. My mother lived there before me. I have rights. You got 9 days and no home. He slapped her car roof, and the sound cracked like a gunshot. You're sleeping in this piece of junk. You work for pocket change. You got no rights. He left a document on her windshield, held down by a stone. Sign the paper, or I get a court order and you lose everything anyway. Your choice. He walked away whistling, and Valentina felt something die inside her chest. That evening, at 6:47 p.m., she saw the flyer on the gas station bulletin board, after-school program needs volunteer crossing guard, Washington Elementary, $15 per hour cash, Monday through Friday, 2:45 to 3:30 p.m. She took the number. The next morning, at 8 a.m., she showed up at Washington Elementary on 23rd Street wearing her last clean shirt. Principal Anderson hired her on the spot. "Just help the kids cross safely," she said. "That's all we need." Day 3 of the crossing guard job arrived cold and clear, the rain finally breaking. Valentina stood at the intersection with her safety vest and stop sign as children poured out of the school. She saw a boy, maybe 6 years old, with Oliver written on his backpack in blue marker, step into the crosswalk just as a delivery truck ran the red light. She didn't think. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She lunged forward, grabbed Oliver by his backpack, yanked him back as the truck roared past inches away from them both. Oliver stumbled, fell hard on the sidewalk, scraped his knee. His crying brought teachers running, brought arms around both of them, brought words of thanks and words calling her a hero. Oliver's grandmother picked him up 20 minutes later, Mrs. Chen, a woman with gentle hands and tired eyes who thanked Valentina profusely and took the boy home. What Mrs. Chen did not mention was that she worked for Rafael Ferraro. She did not mention that Oliver was his nephew. She did not mention any of it as she drove home through the Miami traffic, but she did pick up her phone and call Rafael's office. "A crossing guard saved Oliver today," she told him quietly. "Pulled him right out of the path of a truck." She had dark hair, kind eyes, wore clothes that had seen better days. Rafael sat in his home office reviewing shipping manifests, numbers that blurred together because his mind was already somewhere else. But at Mrs. Chen's words, he looked up. "What's her name?" he asked. "I didn't get it, sir." But she was brave. She didn't hesitate. He called Tony before Mrs. Chen had even hung up. "Washington Elementary. Tomorrow. I want everything." The next day, Tony stood across the street from the school with binoculars, watching a woman in a worn coat help children cross the street. Her smile was genuine despite her shoes being barely held together. He took photographs. He ran her license plate. By 4 p.m., he had a full file: Valentina Santos, age 27, working double shifts at Harbor View Diner, living in her car, eviction notice from Harold Brennan, zero bank account, $5 in her wallet. He handed the tablet to Rafael, who studied the photograph for a long moment. Recognition hit him like a fist. It was her. "She's homeless," Tony said quietly. "Living in her Honda. Owes $85,000 to a landlord. She's got nothing, boss." Rafael's jaw tightened. In 15 years of working for Rafael Ferraro, Tony had never seen this expression on his face, something between rage and protection, between the need to destroy and the need to save. "Bring her to me," Rafael said. "Gently. No fear. Just bring her." That same evening, Valentina finished her crossing guard shift and walked to her car to find the back window smashed, her backpack stolen. Everything she owned in the world, gone. Her extra waitress uniform. Her grandmother's prayer card. The $12 she had been saving. All of it gone. She sat in the driver's seat surrounded by broken glass and felt herself beginning to crack. The rain started again, as if the sky itself was weeping for her. She put her head on the steering wheel and finally broke down sobbing. She didn't see the black SUV pull up. Franco stepped out holding an umbrella, approached the broken car window with careful steps. "Miss Santos." His voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. She jerked her head up, terror flooding through her. "Who are you?" "My employer would like to thank you. For what you did for his nephew. And for something else." He paused. "Will you come with me? Just to talk. I promise you're safe." She should have said no. She should have locked her doors and called the police. But she had nothing left to lose, and something in Franco's eyes told her the truth. Whoever his employer was, they meant her no harm. She got in the SUV. As they pulled away from the curb, neither of them noticed the figure watching from across the street, Harold Brennan, talking quietly into his phone, telling Catherine Mercer exactly what had just happened. The game was about to change completely. The trap was about to close. But none of them knew it yet. The rain hammered against the emergency room windows at St. Mary's Hospital as Valentina regained consciousness, her vision swimming, her entire body a map of pain. She lay in a hospital bed surrounded by machines that beeped in steady rhythm, and when her eyes finally focused, she saw Rafael Ferraro standing at the window, silhouetted against the Miami skyline. His hands were clenched into fists. His shoulders were rigid as stone. He did not turn around when she stirred. "Rafael," she whispered, her voice fractured like broken glass. He turned then, and she saw something in his face she had never seen before, something raw and dangerous and devastating. His dark eyes burned with an intensity that made her breath catch despite the pain in her ribs. "You're awake," he said quietly, crossing the room to her bedside. His voice sounded like thunder rolling across a distant sky. "The doctor said you'll heal. 2 weeks for the ribs, 3 for the concussion. The bruising will fade. Harold and Catherine, they said if I didn't sign." "I know what they said." Rafael pulled a chair close to her bed and sat, his tailored black suit immaculate despite the hour, despite everything. "They made a mistake, Valentina. A fatal one. They believed you were nobody. They believed there would be no consequences." He leaned forward, his jaw clenched. "They were wrong." She wanted to ask him what he meant, but something in his expression told her the answer would terrify her. Instead, she closed her eyes and felt his presence beside her like a fortress, solid, unshakable, utterly committed to her survival. At 4:51 in the morning, as Valentina slept fitfully under hospital sedation, FBI agents in tactical gear surrounded Catherine Mercer's penthouse in Brickell. The woman who had orchestrated Valentina's beating, the woman with manicured nails and a smile like broken glass, woke to flashlights burning her eyes and agents screaming, "FBI, hands where we can see them." She was led out of her building in silk pajamas, handcuffed, as news cameras captured every humiliated second. The footage spread like wildfire, 1 million views by 6 a.m., 2 million by noon, every news outlet in the city running the story of the wealthy developer's fall from grace. The charges appeared one after another on the screen: money laundering, tax evasion, fraud spanning 12 years, extortion of vulnerable tenants, conspiracy. Catherine Mercer, the woman who had smiled while Valentina bled, would face 40 years in federal prison. But that was only the beginning. Harold Brennan never made it to work that morning. At 5:15 a.m., his apartment door exploded inward, and 12 men in black tactical gear moved through his space like ghosts. They did not identify themselves as police. They did not read him his rights. They simply cable-tied him to his living room chair, set up cameras, and waited. Rafael Ferraro arrived at 5:53 a.m., rain dripping from the shoulders of his black cashmere coat, worth more than everything Valentina had owned in her entire life. He moved slowly, deliberately, each step measured and controlled. He stood before Harold Brennan and stared at him for 10 full seconds without speaking. The silence was like a blade through the heart. "You put your hands on her," Rafael said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "You choked her. You beat her because someone told you to." Harold trembled, his face bone-white, his breathing panicked like a wounded animal cornered in an alley. "Ferraro, I was just following orders. I didn't know she was." "You don't get to say her name." Rafael's voice cut through the air like a knife wrapped in ice. "You don't get to think of her. You don't get to remember her. Because she was human, and you treated her like garbage." Tony entered then, holding a tablet, and Rafael scrolled through the screens with methodical precision. "Your bank accounts are frozen. Every illegal payment, every extortion, every threat you've made, it's all been documented and delivered to the district attorney. Every tenant you've ever threatened has been contacted. They've all filed charges. 63 counts. Conspiracy. Assault. Fraud." He paused. 40 years minimum. Harold. Federal prison. And I'm going to ensure that every inmate in that facility knows exactly what you did. Harold Brennan collapsed into himself, sobbing, begging, his entire world shattering in real time as the cameras recorded every second of his destruction. By 11:34 a.m., police had arrested him. By 1 p.m., Catherine Mercer was negotiating a plea deal, her lawyers desperately trying to cut years off her sentence by providing testimony against her co-conspirators. By sunset, both of them were finished, not dead, which Rafael had decided was too merciful, but systematically erased from their positions of power, from their wealth, from their freedom. Real strength is not found in never falling but in always standing back up. At the hospital, Valentina woke as afternoon light slanted through the windows, painting everything in warm gold. Rafael sat beside her bed, and this time his expression was softer, though no less intense. He held a cup of ice water with a straw, and when she tried to move, he gently lifted it to her lips. "Don't try to talk yet," he said. "Just rest." But she had to know. She had to understand what had changed, what he had done, what the world would become now that her attackers were gone. "Will you tell me?" she whispered. Rafael set the water down carefully and took her hand, so gently, as if she were made of glass. "They hurt you. In my world, that means they cease to exist. Not because I'm a good man, Valentina. But because you are." He paused, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "And I will not allow anyone to diminish you again." She wanted to protest, to tell him that justice should be found in courtrooms, not in the shadows of his empire. But she also knew that the legal system had never protected her when she was homeless, when she was desperate, when she had nothing. It was Rafael's world, brutal and efficient and absolutely final, that had saved her when everyone else turned away. Outside the hospital window, the Miami sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, as if the universe itself was celebrating the fall of those who had tried to destroy an invisible woman. But Valentina Santos was no longer invisible. She was seen. She was protected. She was loved by a man who had built an empire on loyalty and codes older than the city itself. And in the room at St. Mary's Hospital, as the machines beat their steady rhythm and the rain finally stopped, Rafael Ferraro held the hand of the woman who had saved his life and allowed himself to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, redemption was still possible. The phone on the nightstand buzzed with a text from Tony, both secured. "What's next?" Rafael looked at Valentina, sleeping peacefully for the first time since her attack, and typed back 2 words, "Everything changes." Rain hammered the penthouse windows as Valentina Santos opened her eyes to 14 months of a life she never thought possible. Sunlight filtered through gauze curtains, soft and forgiving, touching the bruises on her ribs that had faded from purple to the faintest yellow. Her left eye was nearly normal again. The swelling had retreated like a tide pulling back from shore. She moved carefully, testing each muscle, each joint, expecting pain. There was only a dull ache, the kind that reminds you that you survived something, not that it defeated you. The bedroom was larger than the entire car she had slept in for 2 years. High ceilings. Cream-colored walls. A sitting area she had never used. Out the window, Miami stretched in all directions, a city of glass towers and endless traffic, a place where homeless women became directors of charity programs and mafia bosses brought soup to women they were supposed to destroy. A soft knock. Rafael entered before she could answer, moving like a man who had learned to move through rooms without disturbing the air. He carried a tray, soup again, always soup, as if feeding her had become his primary mission in life. Chicken and vegetables. Still warm. "How do you feel?" His voice was steady, professional, the voice of a man maintaining careful distance from the edge of something dangerous. "Like I survived." She sat up slowly, and he adjusted pillows without being asked. "Rafael, I need to ask you something." He set the tray down. "Anything." "When did they arrest Catherine Mercer?" His jaw tightened. "Within 6 hours of what happened in that alley. FBI raid on her offices. They found everything, the property scheme, the bribery, the offshore accounts. She's facing 42 years now. The prosecution is thorough." "And Harold Brennan?" singing like a bird in federal custody. He gave them Catherine's entire network in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'll still do 30 to 40 years. The threat is finished, Valentina. Both of them are done. She closed her eyes. When she had been bleeding on that warehouse floor, she had believed this moment would never come. She had believed Harold Brennan's fists and Catherine Mercer's cold smile would define the rest of her life. Instead, they were in cages, and she was sitting in a penthouse eating soup made by a man who could have let her die. "I want to understand something," Valentina said quietly. "Why did you do it? You could have just paid them off. You could have bought them a house in another country and forgotten about it." Rafael sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle her. His hands were large and scarred, hands that had built empires and broken men, but right now they were gentle as they reached for the water glass. "Because they chose to hurt you." His voice dropped lower, and something dangerous flickered across his face. "In my world, there is one absolute rule: the people who are under my protection do not bleed without consequence. You saved my life when you could have walked past me in the rain. You saved Oliver without knowing who he was. You refused to break even when they beat you." He paused, his dark eyes meeting hers. "That kind of strength doesn't come from fear. It comes from something deeper. That deserved protection." "You could have killed them," she whispered. "I considered it." He didn't look away. "Death would have been too quick, too easy, too merciful. This is better. They'll spend decades in a cell, knowing exactly how they fell. Catherine Mercer, the woman who built her empire on believing people were disposable, will watch her empire collapse on every news channel in the country. Harold Brennan will receive letters from the people she destroyed, the tenants she evicted, the families she ruined. Every day will be a reminder that what they did mattered, and what they did was wrong." Valentina felt something shift in her chest. She had grown up believing justice came from courtrooms and lawyers and systems designed to protect the powerful. She had learned in 2 years of homelessness that those systems failed the invisible. Raphael's world was brutal, but it was certain. There was no loophole. No appeal that would save them. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of them. Of this. Of you. Of what happens next." He handed her the soup. "Eat. Then we talk about what happens next." She ate in silence. The soup was good, Mrs. Chen's recipe, Raphael told her, Oliver's grandmother who had lived in his household for 15 years. Mrs. Chen had been visiting every day since Valentina woke up, bringing meals and stories, sitting in the chair beside her bed as if guarding against nightmares. No one had cared for Valentina like this. Ever. Even before the homelessness, even before her family fell apart, no one had simply shown up with soup and stayed. Over the next week, Valentina moved through Raphael's house like someone learning to live again. The guest room became her world. Mrs. Chen brought breakfast. Oliver visited, drawing pictures of the two of them fighting bad guys, crude stick figures but fierce, with hearts coming out of their chests. Franco and Tony appeared in doorways, always asking if she needed anything, if she was comfortable, if the pain was manageable. She didn't understand why a Mafia boss's security team was rotating shifts outside her room until Raphael finally explained it. "You're protected," he said on day 4, sitting beside her as rain drummed against the windows. "Every man in this house knows that you're under my personal protection. That means no one touches you, no one comes near you, no one even speaks to you without permission. They would die before letting anything happen to you again. That's a lot of responsibility to give people. It's not responsibility. It's honor." He adjusted the blanket across her legs carefully. "In our world, honor is everything. If I declare someone protected, that protection is absolute. They understand this." By day 8, Valentina was moving through the house, walking the hallways, learning the geography of Raphael's world. The legitimate operations occupied the first 3 floors of the building, shipping logistics, employee records, community outreach programs that her own position would soon fill. The rest of the building was quieter, more secure, monitored by systems she didn't understand. On day 9, Rafael found her standing at the window of his office, looking down at Miami spreading beneath them like a circuit board of lights. "I've been thinking about your position," he said. "Director of Community Outreach. You'll manage all the charity programs, work with local nonprofits, oversee the scholarship fund. The salary is 6 figures annually. Health insurance. A retirement plan. A car, should you want one." She turned to face him. "Why would you offer me all of that?" "Because you're talented. Because you understand poverty in a way most people never will. Because you've proven you have more integrity than people who were born with everything." He paused. "And because I can't let you leave." The words hung between them, unspoken implications filling the space. She wanted to ask him to clarify. She wanted to pretend she didn't know what he meant. She wanted to run away and protect herself from wanting something this much. Instead, she said, "The year is almost over. Our agreement." "I know. What happens when it ends?" Rafael stepped closer. The air between them seemed to contract. "You choose. You leave, and I set you up anywhere you want. Different city. Different name. $5 million to start your life. Clean break. And if I don't choose to leave, then we stop pretending this is temporary." His voice was rough, carved from stone. "Then we stop maintaining distance. Then I do the thing I've wanted to do since the night you asked me why I was helping you. I tell you exactly what you mean to me." Valentina's heart was a trapped bird in her chest. "Say it now." Rafael reached for her face, his scarred hands gentle as they cupped her cheeks. "I fell in love with you the moment you said you were nobody. I watched you move through this house realizing you were somebody, and I fell in love with you more. You are the first thing I've wanted that isn't about power or protection or loyalty codes older than I am. You're the first thing I've wanted just for the sake of wanting it." She kissed him before he could say more. 14 months of restraint shattered like glass under pressure. He tasted like coffee and something deeper, something that felt like coming home after years of running. His hands dropped to her waist, careful of her healing ribs, and she could feel the earthquake happening inside him, the control cracking. When they broke apart, breathless, she whispered, "I want to stay." "For how long?" "Forever, if you'll have me." Rafael pulled her close, and outside the windows, rain fell on Miami, washing the city clean. Somewhere below them, Catherine Mercer counted her prison days. Somewhere else, Harold Brennan stared at walls. And here, in a penthouse suspended above the city, a man who had been built to destroy and a woman who had learned to survive found something neither expected. Real strength is not found in never falling but in always standing back up. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me, what would you have done if you found a stranger bleeding in the rain? Your answer matters. We'll be back tomorrow with another story that will leave you speechless. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.